So here I'm using the LTS 2.83.12, my favorite punching bag, along with Blender 717.13, an older version of Boxcutter. And if we press Q, we see that we're using 987.1, which is an older version of HardOps. We can go under box and we'll just draw a box and press V to begin arraying. And Boxcutter's array has its own growing pains that'll be addressed in time, but if we just shift this to live, we now have our array. So one of the main goals with array v2 was the ability to resume arrays better. So if we press Q and we just jump into array, we see that the objects have jump position, and when we modify it via movement, it's not even moving it on the right axis. So this was something that was found to be a bit problematic, especially because you have to press X to change the axis, and then you can press V to jump into 3D mode, and then you can get it positioned how you want and scroll segments in between. But still, that's too many keys for this particular operation. So here we are, still in 2.83.12 using 717.13 on the Boxcutter side, but if we press Q, we've bumped up a couple of versions and we're now using 2.87.3 on the HardOps side. So this version, we added the ability to start off in either 3D or 2D. So if we jump into it, we see that in 2D, it's perfect. You're able to just sit there, roll the wheel, not have your distance interrupted until you begin moving the mouse. However, if we were to go under our drop down and go to opt-ins and change our array type to be 3D on instantiation, this means at the moment that we start it, it's at the mercy of where our mouse is positioned. So I'll put my mouse here, and if we start array, we see that it just gets bumped a little bit. And the goal is to set up array, have array the way you want it, and then get in and resume it. However, the cool thing about this particular update is that you can now control click array and it will actually add a new array. So if you're trying to just do a grid array, you can do that really easily by just control clicking it, and it will just add an array on top of it and automatically choose the next axis for starting that set array. So if we click off this, we can now jump over to the latest version of array. So now we are in 2.93.0 alpha, the most up-to-date bleeding edge version of Blender, and we're using 717.16. And if we were to press Q, we see that we're using 987.5, which is the latest version. Under our opt-in settings, we can see that we are using array v2 and we're under 3D. And this means that whenever we jump into array, there should be a kind of hiccup in the shape, similar to what you saw in the last example. However, new to this version is now a dead zone circle, meaning that while you're inside this circle, you can roll your wheel and adjust how many segments is added to the array without disrupting what's happening around it. However, the moment that you break outside the circle, you are in control of adjusting how the array can be adjusted. So let's set it to something smaller, press Q, jump into array. We are now able to get in and adjust the distance organically. In addition to this, array v2 now supports the ability to press 1 in order to stack things right on top of each other, which is something you normally wouldn't do with the cutter, but in times where you're making manifold meshes, you may want to press 1 or shift 1 in order to stack meshes precisely on top of each other. And previously that was exclusive to 2D mode, and that's also now a thing inside of 3D array. So to just show it one more time, we'll just click to apply. If we press Q and we start it, your mouse will have a circle around it, and in this circle there will be no mouse movement perceived or interpreted except for you rolling the wheel to adjust your segments until you move outside of it, and then you're able to freely move. And this actually extends to all modes of array, but especially whenever you're dealing with a situation like, for example, we'll press V and jump over to 2D, which is where I normally set arrays to 1 or shift 1. Now I can actually go in and adjust the segments on it, and it doesn't affect it with my mouse movement. Sometimes I twitch just a little bit and it ends up moving the array, and I'm just letting you know that now special care has been taken to allow for you to get in and adjust your array count without disrupting anything else that would normally be undesired. Array with 1 is something that we've tried on a multitude of tools. For example, when it comes to our array and hops tool, we also tried it. So I'm just creating a quick shape, and if we press Alt W, we can go to hops, and I'm just going to choose, let's see, array Z. And so now you see that I have an array on the Z axis. I can grab this dot and move it, but if I press 1, you can see that it snaps it precisely on top of it. So it's always been kind of a thing with us in HardOps to be able to snap arrays precisely on each other, since it allows us to go back and do things like set up curves and deform them. In Hops, there's a curve modifier menu that, when used, also allows you to use of an F9, which is something that I just found Blender to be lacking, but I hope that that becomes a thing someday. So we'll just stretch this out, add a few more loop cuts, and just like that, we've created an array deforming asset that's perfectly sitting on top of each other. However, in order to really get this thing to look right, we'll need to go in and deal with the either merge options or just add a weld modifier at the end, which will also clean this up. So for the purposes of this example, I'm using 2Shape V2 instead of 1.5 just because I like the presentation of decap with V2. If I were to press QOT, I can roll the wheel back once, which will put me in decap mode, and whenever I move the mouse, I'm actually setting up basically a decap array mesh. And if I were to press C, I can bring my caps back, which shows up in the form of these lines, so I can just tell if I'm cutting too far or into the wrong area. So if we just click, we've now created an array decap mesh. So I'll just press GZ and move this up. And one of the key things with array is that, the ability to press 1 to snap is something that we've always been able to do. For example, here I am using Control Shift in order to drag this out. However, in order to move the distances, we see that it breaks down with this particular type of array. So let's go back a moment and let's jump into array V2. Well, now that there's this dead zone circle, I can go in and adjust the amount of segments to it and not have to worry about adjusting this by accident, because sometimes you just want to get in and adjust a count to extend or shorten your asset without having to unnecessarily mess with your distance, which would cause you to have to control tilde, go into the behavior helper or the hops helper and deal with the array properties explicitly. When it comes to array, a lot of work has gone into making it even easier to use than ever, so now users should be able to get in and easily use array with the 3D mode, which I hope to see come to Boxcutter in the future. Being able to control click and add a new array as well is something that will be essential for making grid arrays on the fly without a whole lot of difficulty. And this is just the beginning. There's more that we plan to do with array as far as interactivity and ways to expand on its functionality. But for now, I'm proud of its ability to be able to jump in and resume itself without having to break any of the previous systems, and also allow users to jump between arrays and choose which ones you're wanting to adjust on the fly just via control scroll, similar to how one would do with bevel. But just letting you know that we are at it round the clock when it comes to getting these tools working at their best, and I'm quite proud of the work that has gone into array for this particular release.